however you may be listening, wherever you may be listening. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. My name is Donnie Drew, and joined every week by my main man, Richie Brads. 36 on Twitter is where you can find him. You can find me on Twitter at Donnie Druin, or X, whatever the cool kids call it. Actually, not every week, because we had a little bye week there for the Cardinals. I was sick as a
Literally
dog.
took a bye week.
Yeah, awful, but it feels really good to be back. My wife is not a fan of me talking so much again, but live and you
She
learn.
never is.
I don't even know where the receipt's at, to be honest. So
Is
she
she
can
ever
even
a fan
return
of
me
you
if she
talking,
wanted.
though?
Yeah. But we're recording this ahead of the 49ers Cardinals matchup on Sunday in week 15. I did a little video with all 49ers publisher Grant Cohn, which you can check out on the YouTube channel. Obviously, follow us and subscribe at All Cardinals on YouTube. Richie, we will not be talking 49ers and Cardinals. We'll be talking a little bit of Kyler Murray, a little bit of Marquise Brown. But before we get into the mix, how are you?
I'm in a pretty good mood. If there's any Sun Devil fans out there, you know what's going down. Not gonna get too into detail here. If you would like those details, you can check out the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. But it's a great day to be a Sun Devils fan. It's really exciting for the Cardinals, who are coming off a huge upset win against the Steelers. Should be feeling good right now. But like Donnie said, we're not here to talk about the game. We're here to talk about the players right now.
Two big players indeed. We'll go ahead and start with Marquise
But
Brown.
not
Richie.
literally big.
Right. Pro Football Focus recently did a preview of the top 50 free agents heading into 2024. Marquise Brown landed at number 19 on the list, and they as in PFF, went through different projections and predicted what would ultimately happen with them. As of now, Brad Spielberger, the author of the article, which will be linked in the description, says that the Cardinals will franchise tag Marquise Brown, and there's a couple different options whenever it comes to the future of Marquise. He's an unrestricted free agent heading into next season. So we know the relationship with Kyler Murray. We know the expectations placed on Marquise whenever he was first brought over here, exchanged for a first-round pick a couple off seasons ago. Fairly or unfairly has not really lived up to the wide receiver one expectations placed on him. There's I feel like a myriad of reasons why he hasn't. That's no attack against him. That's more like circumstantial more than anything. You see the numbers on the screen, 2024 projections via overthecap.com. If they do franchise tag him and they don't agree on an extended contract, the franchise tag will be 21.6. The transition tag will be 19.3 million. All 1 year, fully guaranteed. And for those who don't know, basically the difference between the franchise and the transition is if you put a franchise tag on said player and you choose not to match a contract they get offered by another team, you will receive financial compensation via draft capital. If it's only the transition tag, you receive nothing if you decide not to match whatever contract they get. So give me your thoughts on Marquise. We'll get into tag or don't tag here in just a minute, but that's a lot of money I'm looking at on the screen right now, man.
It is a lot of money. And Hollywood, I think we've come to know through 5 seasons now that Hollywood is very much a number 2 receiver, but he's a very good number 2 receiver. The problem is he's been forced to be a number 1 receiver pretty much the entirety of his career, Donnie. His 3 seasons in Baltimore, he was the number 1 guy. He did have a 1,000-yard season, but it came on 91 catches. Last season in Arizona, we saw when DeAndre Hopkins was on the field, Hollywood looked great. And Hollywood had some really good flashes as the one, but we've seen that throughout his career. Now you're looking at a situation where he needs to get paid, and he's going to get paid by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Cardinals should really, really consider looking into keeping him around, giving him a long-term deal. The problem is you got to get it done soon because this is, and I'm a big Hollywood fan. I really am. I've got 2 jerseys of Hollywood Brown. Very, very big fan. You cannot franchise tag him. That is way too much money for a number 2 receiver who's been very inconsistent. yes, I think you need to bring him back. The market value would be perfect with that 14.8. I think that is more than reasonable when you consider the going rate for receivers. Like if you're gonna bring him back, you need to do it within the next 2 months. Like you can't let it get to March because at that point feels like he's gonna have a foot out the door.
Yeah, so they've had contract talks according to Brown, and they've both been positive. It seems like both sides want to get something done and keep Brown around for the long term, which I think is a good move. But it's just kind of that price point. Let me ask you this. I'm still not over my cold, apparently. Let me ask you this because a lot of people keep throwing out the Christian Kirk deal, which, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 years, 72 million, right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, Marquise is probably going to aim for that. That seems fair. They're pretty identical players, not in terms of skill set or what they do, just in terms of the money they would probably get on the open market.
And the circumstance.
Sure. Is that too much?
No. I
Okay.
think exactly what you said, that's the benchmark. You look at what Hollywood has done so far in his career, it's almost entirely comparable to Christian Kirk. Both of them have had some bang ups during their career. Both have looked very quality at times. Both have 1,000-yard season and play really good when they've got good quarterback play. To me, that is honestly like a perfect deal in my mind. I know that I just said you would love that 14.8 a year and that the market value is great. But if you did need to spend a little bit more, dude, 18 a year is not bad for a receiver these days. It really isn't. I know a lot of people will stick up their noses at that, but it's just the direction that contracts are going. It's the direction the salary cap is going. Guys are going to cost that much money. Uh, this is a what I would consider the most that I would pay would be that Christian Kirk contract. I could not get into the 20s
Okay.
personally. Obviously, again, I'm going to reiterate it. I love the idea of 14.8. I don't think you're getting him for 14.8. If you got him for 18, that Christian Kirk deal, I'd do it and I wouldn't think twice about it.
Yeah, because you look at the numbers. I think if you can somehow get him under 15, awesome. Because I
Good
do think,
luck.
and we'll talk about this here in a little bit. You want to try to keep Kyler as happy as possible, and even if you go get a Marvin Harrison Jr. or somebody else, maybe in free
That shouldn't
agency,
stop
another
you.
big name, you should still want a Marquise Brown on your
Yeah, it
receiving core.
shouldn't
Now,
stop
granted,
you from bringing him back. And
I
that
would
shouldn't
agree,
stop you
and
from drafting a guy either. Vice versa.
maybe he does function better in that like wide receiver 2 role. We really didn't see it whenever him and DeAndre Hopkins were here together because I mean it just felt like the two couldn't get on the field together very often, if at all. They only played a handful of games together.
When they did, it looked good,
It's tough.
but
It did.
that's a
It
problem.
did for sure. And maybe the thinking behind that is okay, let's say the Cardinals do go get Marvin Harrison Jr. They are able to land him in the draft. Now we're cooking because now you have Marvin Harrison Jr., a generational receiver prospect. You have Marquise Brown. You have a hopefully healthy Michael Wilson. Then you still have Rondell Moore and Greg Dortch. I mean, that's a very solid receiving core at worst.
It is easily the best receiving core that Kyler will have ever had
I would agree.
in Arizona. And I'll go as far as to say it'd be as good as what he had at Oklahoma. And keep in mind, he played with CeeDee Lamb and Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. All three of them are at a minimum good NFL players. You would be placing him in a situation where he would have an abundance of talent. And we can't forget about Trey McBride either. Like there's a lot of weapons here for the Cardinals, which to me is one more reason why you should hold on to Marquise Brown. It feels like you would not quite addition by subtraction, but if you lost Hollywood, replaced him with MHJ, obviously it's an upgrade, but you're still taking a hit to your receiver room because Rondell is talented, but he's not great. he'd be much better as your 4, right? Which is the situation that we're putting him in. So to me, I figure out a way to bring Hollywood back. The thought that you could have him like those top 3, right? Uh, what is it? Maserati Marv? Is that what they call him?
Gus Johnson calls him that. I don't want to hear anybody call him that.
I want to hear Gus Johnson call him that, and I don't want to hear anyone else call him that. But between MHJ, Hollywood, and Michael Wilson, obviously it's a theoretical kind of receiving core right now. But, dude, you would have 31 other teams that would kill for that.
So I have no problem with Brown being franchise tagged if you are very confident you can get a long-term deal done. Because the last thing you want to do is strike out and miss on a long-term restructure or extension and have him play on that almost $22 million deal.
Right.
And just have him hit free agency again. Then if you franchise tag him again, the cost is going to be exponentially more, right? It goes up. The transition tag would be interesting because at least you get the opportunity to match another contract. And like if another team is gonna pay Hollywood $20 million a year, you can at least let him test it out in the open market and see for yourself, right? It's not Marquise's agent talking in your ear during the regular season saying, hey, Patriots could pay $20 million a year for my client. And you're like, okay, well, let's find out. And then you get to March, and then lo and behold, Marquise gets 20 or 22 million on the open market from some cap crazy team, maybe like Chicago, right? You at least have the opportunity to deny it, right? At least in terms of bringing him back or letting him go. The option is there for you to keep him, right? At least with one of those 2 tags, you have that opportunity as opposed to just letting him walk and kind of rolling the dice like they did with Zach Allen last year, like they did with Byron Murphy last year.
I think you nailed it. Is you need to be in a situation where if you are going to tag him, like you said, you need to extend him. You cannot place yourself in a situation where he's going to play on the tag. It's not good for him. It's not good for you. So you can tag him, but that it's not even a Band-Aid at that point. It is like we just need to continue doing this. You don't want it to drag out to a situation where he might not want to play on the tag. We saw that with Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley, different positions, but
Le'Veon.
Yeah, like it's a real fear that.
So the good news, they've had these talks during the season, so they at least know where each other is at, just in terms of numbers. So I feel like if they were to franchise tag Marquise, they would have a pretty good idea of where he's at. And the Cardinals, whenever they roll over their 2023 cap space into 2024, they're projected around $70 million. You can do a contract to where that money, a good chunk of it, and it's very common and popular with like a lot of big name free agents, not like backloading, but save like majority of that money for a little bit later down the road. It's like you wouldn't be like killing yourself just in terms of like having almost a quarter of that money be eaten up with just one player in Marquise Brown, who we've already talked about isn't exactly a wide receiver 1, but still would be a very beneficial player for Kyler and for everybody else moving forward. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting, but Monte Alston-Fort no longer is the new guy on the block. He's had almost a year under his belt as the general manager of the Cardinals. So I'm really interested to see how this pans out. I don't know. I would have mixed feelings about him ultimately being tagged, but we can save that convo for another day. But it sounds like Marquise wants to be back. It sounds like the Cardinals want him to be back. It sounds like the Cardinals want Kyler Murray to be back. So offensive coordinator Drew Petzing went on the Adam Schefter podcast, just the Adam Schefter NFL ESPN insider, and he said the following about Kyler Murray and the plans for 2024.
Your decision, but Arizona has 2 first-round draft picks. A lot of people wondered whether they could eventually pursue a quarterback, but it sounds like in your mind, you know who you'd like your quarterback to be. Am I reading that incorrectly?
No, absolutely. I think, and the goal is always going to be to make the roster better in every way, shape, or form. I think Monty the scouting staff, the entire department is committed to that goal, but feel really good about where Kyler's at as a franchise quarterback. I mean, he's absolutely that, as you just said. And I think he's done a great job of embracing that role and owning that role and moved into that role as he hit the field here, whatever it was about a month ago. So I've been really pleased with that.
So very high words of praise coming from Drew Petzing. Kyler's had 4 games in the offense now. He has 4 games remaining on the schedule. The Cardinals are not technically mathematically eliminated as we enter week 15, but I mean, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point. They will not be playing in the postseason. Give me your overall thoughts on Kyler before we get into his future here. But it does sound like they want him around for 2024. And that wasn't always a foregone conclusion heading into the season.
Donnie, we've been on both sides of the fence at this point. There's been times on this podcast where we said, you got to hit the reset button, you got to move on, you got to get Caleb Williams, whatever. We have also been on the side of saying you got to hold on to Kyler. And, maybe to a fault, we're kind of flipping sides. But at the same time, I think it's good to be objective and take a look at both sides of the argument. And at this point in the year, December 16th is when we're recording this. It feels pretty safe to say the Cardinals would be making their best decision to hold on to Kyler. Him and Jonathan Gannon seem to be, at least on a good page with each other. We've seen those two kind of buddy with each other. I think that Drew Petzing has got a good situation in place for Kyler for the offense to be successful. I think we've seen some good play out of Kyler. Obviously, he looks a little rusty. Who would have thought a guy coming off an ACL injury and less than a year recovery time is going to look a little rusty? But there's been a lot of good with Kyler this year. And I think that that's one of the most important things you need to remember right now when you're taking a look at assessing the future is understanding that Kyler should be playing better at some point. Like, this isn't like a question of if he plays better. It's more of a question of when he begins to play better. He's more than capable of doing it. He's just getting comfortable. He's getting comfortable in a new scheme on his knee. He's going to be getting used to some new weapons next year. I would imagine that even if it's not MHJ, I don't see any reason the Cardinals don't take a look at Doomsday up in Washington, Malik Neighbors, Keon Coleman, Troy Franklin. It's a loaded class to look at wide receivers. And, maybe they add a guy in free agency. I'm not sure everyone. Maybe they look at Keenan Allen if he gets dropped or something. But there's a lot of possibilities for the Cardinals to improve their receiving room. And with improving that means that Kyler's going to play better. Kyler had some of his best football when he was thrown to DeAndre Hopkins. It's going to get better. I promise that if you're displeased with what he's doing right now, I don't think that that's necessarily fair. It's only going to get better, in my opinion. I think he's a great fit for this team. He's well established. I mean, this is finishing year 5, right? 2019.
Yeah.
Finishing year 5. He'll be going into year 6 next year. And that's when his contract will kick in. So I think you're in a good situation. So I don't see any reason to get rid of him. Like I said, we've been on both sides of this. Like we've been negative about Kyler staying. We've been positive about Kyler staying. At the end of the 2023 calendar year, I think you need to stay with Kyler Murray. And if I flip-flop again, either something went terribly wrong or I need everyone to call me out.
I think it's important to stay objective. Like you had kind of previously said, nobody really knew the answer to whether or not Kyler was going to stay until we saw him on the field. And fairly or unfairly, the final 8 games of the Cardinals schedule was pretty much going to dictate whether or not the Cardinals would seek other quarterback options. We saw Josh Dobbs in this offense. We saw Clayton Tune in this offense. 2 quarterbacks that many people thought should have started the entire way, before Kyler came back. As we sit here today, one day before week 15 against the Niners, 4 games left, I think Kyler has done enough to cement himself a spot on this team in 2024. Contract or not, he's had ups, he's had downs. I think you can make a good argument that he's only going to get better in a much better suited offense for the professional football landscape, the National Football League, with Drew Petzing not calling plays like Cliff Kingsbury, with more talent around him, with more time on his knee recovering, like you had pointed out. I think he's in a much better place mentally now that he's with the coaching staff in the front office that does not hate him, because it's really funny how Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury ditched town, and all of a sudden we stopped hearing all the negative reports about Kyler Murray.
Right.
Really shocking, isn't it? To quote, I don't know exactly who said this, but like, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. You
That sounds
cannot
like
sit
something I
here.
say.
Yeah, or the father-in-law, but that's another topic of conversation. As we say here today, I think Kyler's in a much better place physically and mentally with this new regime than he was with the previous one. And the hope with that is that it can only get better. I think when you look at Kyler from a trade perspective, the contract, ultimately at the end of the day, if you're a team that feels like they're a quarterback away from the Super Bowl, I don't think the contract is a big deterrent. I think if the Cardinals wanted to trade Kyler Murray, they could. But should they? As of right now, I don't think so.
There's a lot of obstacles to do it too. Like, I know we mentioned it during the offseason, but there are so many steps that would need to be taken for any team to inherit Kyler Murray. I said a lot that the Falcons should be one of the teams to call. Even if they are, man, there's so many things that need to be ironed out for the Falcons to pull off that trade, for the Saints, for the Titans, the Patriots. I'm just kind of spitballing off the top of my head. The Raiders, like, there's a lot that would need to get ironed out. It almost makes more sense to just hold on to Kyler Murray. Who would think? Isn't that crazy? Hold on to the 2-time Pro Bowl quarterback and the offensive rookie of the year. You could do a lot worse.
Winner, number one pick. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I know Cardinals fans, a lot of them don't like Kyler. The national view on Kyler Murray, though, the way people talk about him, you wouldn't think he's a multi-time Pro Bowler.
No,
right? It's crazy. So I don't know. 4 games left. I still think the evaluation process is taking place. I still think no decision 100% has been made either way, because you still need to do your due diligence. You still need to see Kyler finish the season, right? But as of right now, I think it looks really, really good in terms of the prospect of Kyler Murray coming back to the desert in 2024. Now, whether or not that's an easy decision, whether or not that's already a foregone conclusion, I don't know. But from the outside, Kyler's the guy.
One more thing I want to add.
Yes, sir.
A lot of our conversation when we did talk about Kyler potentially being gone was with the Cardinals assumingly having the number 1 pick. You have number 3 right now, and I'll be honest, I don't know if I see you getting higher than 3. Patriots are a dumpster fire. I don't know if the Panthers are going to win another game this year.
No.
So you're not in play for Caleb anymore, which was the main driving point and the catalyst for whether or not they should hold on to him. You're not dealing Kyler Murray for Drake May, and you're probably not going to be in Drake May's sweepstakes either. So you can just throw that out the window. Like, you can't sit here and say, well, what if Caleb's there? Caleb won't be there. I promise you. Guarantee it. Unless you're willing to move up for him, and that would be stupid.
I mean, really quick, because like Chicago is definitely going to end up with that number 1 pick, barring something crazy happening. But even if they stick with Justin Fields for another year, if they're smart, which granted, Chicago is not proven to be a intellectual football team in terms of how they piece together a roster.
I'm not a smart man,
but I know what a quarterback is. If they're smart, what they would do is they would auction that pick off to whoever did want to come up to number 1, fall back a couple spots, get crazy draft ammo for this year, next year, and probably the year after, and then let whoever else take Caleb there at number 1. Really quick, though, have you fallen off the Caleb hype train? Because it feels like a lot of people in the draft community have not soured on Caleb Williams as a prospect, but I mean, is he still that like glistening can't miss guy, that generational dude that he was at the beginning of the year?
The only thing that quote unquote worries me is his attitude. Otherwise, I mean, this is still a guy that can just effortlessly push the football down the field. He's beyond accurate. I mean, he gets surgical on guys. He's Russell Wilson in the pocket, the way that everything starts to break down and he's scrambling, running, and it's like, what's this guy going to do? And it's like,
Prime
he's going to
Russell
find
Wilson.
someone open. What's that?
It's a prime Russell Wilson, not Broncos.
Dude, yeah, no. Prime, like 2017 Russell Wilson. You couldn't sack him. And he was going to find somebody open. That's Caleb Williams. Like, I think that is a spot on comparison for him. And if somebody else has something better, let me know. I think he's a 2-inch taller version of Russell Wilson. Like, he's so dangerous, dude. So from the perspective of am I lower on him? No. Am I interested in how he carries himself? Yes, absolutely. Because it feels like just the last 3 months, this dude has kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, not even because of his play, but because of his demeanor and his attitude and everything. End of the day, I think he's a competitor. I'm not overly worried about it. It's just something that I'm going to be looking into a little more as the process goes on. Also,
Well,
he should not go back to school. That is such a stupid argument.
No,
Such
he
a
won't.
stupid argument.
Neither should Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean,
No.
the fact even if he
NIL,
does get like a 20 million NIL deal, I
It's
mean,
not even close to what you're going to make in the pros. Endorsements, your contract, not even close.
I completely agree. But
And
I mean,
it's
there's still
1
plenty
year.
of time.
Right.
Yep. I mean, we're gonna have all off season to break that down. But it sounds like takeaways from this podcast. Marquise Brown should stay for one reason or another, and Kyler Murray should stay for one reason or another. So, do you have any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Let Dilly cook. Let Dilly cook.
Let Dilly cook. Dilly is cooking indeed. The Valley is
With
being activated.
gas.
Cooking with gas. And so are we here at the All Cardinals podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals show. Go to follow Richie on Twitter at RichieBrads36 on X. Follow me on Twitter or X at Donnie Druin. And we'll see you guys next time.